Greetings YouTube, Alan Lu back with another video, and here I am going to do a tier list. I haven't done one of these in such a long time, honestly. It was something I used to do quite frequently, but as things kind of played out, it didn't really feel like tier list videos were really necessary. Like everyone kind of knew what was going on, like, oh, Lexi's best deck, oh, Icelander's pretty good, oh, Dromi's pretty good, things like that. But with heavy hitters out, with Icelander gone, this is probably like the largest meta shakeup we've had since Outsiders, basically. And so I'm coming into this video with a very, prediction mindset. It's still very early. I haven't tested like a ton of things, but I've seen some of the new heroes in action. I have some premature thoughts, and these are just going to be like my predictions for the sort of RTN season coming up. And then leading into the Pro Tour, things will definitely change. My opinions will definitely change. But I thought I might as well just do a video for fun, because why not? And I'm not trying to sort of do the SABC type thing, but basically this top tier is the decks that I feel like most people would agree are the strongest decks right now. They've proven to be good. They're consistent. They have, something special about their kit that other heroes really have to plan around. They'll probably take up a large majority of the meta share. The tier below that is, also we're in such a sort of open meta right now. Like, it's not like previous triangle metas or things like that. It really does feel like, at least for an RTN season, you can bring like 10 different A tier heroes and you can, win the whole thing. And below that is, heroes that, they're not bad, but they're not great either. And so they just need it just a little bit more. And then a tier below that is, realistically, if you're looking to win, I don't think you should play these heroes. So let's get right into it. But before that, please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. You can skip to the end and see all the tiers, or you can flame me in the comments. But it is what it is. So yeah, let's start. Let's just go alphabetical, I guess. Arachne, I think most people can agree this is like a passion project hero. You play this hero because you like it. It has a lot of bad polarizing matchups, and it doesn't really even have that many great matchups either. So yeah, I'm putting Arachne into the passion project tier. And there's also Azuri. So Azuri is really just better Arachne. Even with the new is it a specialization? The new blue card expansion slot and heavy hitters, that's like a nice little addition, but it's not really going to change anything. Moving on to Azalea. I think Azalea probably goes right into the A tier. She's really strong. She outputs a ton of damage, a ton of on hits. She has dominate, but she's has weaker armor. She has the risk of being fatigued. Doesn't deal with disruption super easily. So because of that, she has, some great matchups, some not so great matchups, and just overall I'd put her in A tier. Betsy, I would probably put in the decent tier just because, it's the same situation kind of as Arachne right now for me, in that there's Bravo, and Bravo really just feels like better Betsy, similar to like Azuri and Arachne. But I do think as a whole, the Guardian card pool is just like better and more consistent and deeper than the Assassin card pool. So that's the reason why I would put her in the decent/B tier. I still think if you want to win, an event, you would just rather play Bravo. But, if you don't think Bravo is long for this world and you want to get some reps on Betsy and test out a few things, I wouldn't be surprised if I found one in like an RTN or something. Bolton is really hard to rate. He's been doing pretty well before heavy hitters and like the Battle Hardens and the Realm Rumble and things like that. Roger Bodie got second at the Battle Harden Cincinnati, I believe, only losing to Michael Hamilton. Yuki got top 8 at the Realm Rumble. I believe Ellie also top 8'd the 10K Realm Invitational during that weekend. So Bolton definitely has like a lot of strengths. The Saber combo is very good into sort of quote unquote aggro decks, more like the ninjas and stuff, where you can just block, and eventually when you combo, you just blow them out of the game. Against Guardian, I think just a mid-range Raiden plan is pretty good, because for the most part, Guardian's deck is full of attack actions. With Victor, things might change a bit, But maybe with Victor, you can definitely, play a bit of a slower game and still set up like really big turns. So I think Bolton definitely has a lot of good things going for him, but just overall, he's very synergy driven due to his light talent and hero ability. And, the charge mechanic can be awkward at times and lead to lower rate turns on average. So I wouldn't put him in the decent tier. I'd put him in the A tier for now, but that could change. I'm not sure. Bravo, definitely putting him in the proven and strong tier. The new Tunic build is really strong and consistent. Tectonic builds are still fine. He is probably still just the best Guardian. Dominate isn't extremely useful, but in some matchups it's really important. He has Crippling, he has Starstruck, he just has so much going for him. It really feels like he's definitely one of the best decks at the moment. And he does have bad matchups, of course. I think a really skilled Dromi pilot can definitely make the matchup favored for Dromi. But Dromi can definitely run into issues into other matchups. Kano is a really hard matchup for Bravo. You just can't really do much about their combo. You can only output so much damage, depending how much Kano blocks or how much he sets up. He can just kill you out of nowhere. Other bad matchups, I think dual wield warriors in general are a bad matchup for Bravo. They can just drag out the game really long, and Valiant Dynamo gets a ton of value. You could, I guess, try to fatigue the dual-handed warriors by making them run out of go again. But Kasai, for example, has Ray's Army, Blood on Her Hands, like just additional ways to go over the top when the game lasts really long. And in general, if you're just blocking out, you probably are slowly losing the game. Dory has a ton of new tools also, which can be problematic for Bravo. Bravo in general doesn't run like the really big D-reacts anymore, like Staunch and Unmovable. So you can only do so much before like second or third cycle things get awkward, especially because D-reacts you can't really pitch efficiently unless you're playing Unmovable, and Unmovable is like a really big commitment to have in your deck, the red one specifically. Like you can run blues, that's fine, but Warriors can definitely drag out the game to second cycle, maybe even third cycle if you're both playing really defensively, and usually they can just get there. I could be wrong. Bravo, especially on a Tunic build, could just bully the Warrior with like CNC pummels or like just Spinals pummels and things like that. So in general, I think against like dual-handed warriors, Bravo is in general the aggressor, but it also feels like if things don't line up right, or they get their shunts or their sinks or whatever, then and you don't hit them with bad effects, then it's just going to be rough. And the brute matchups also pretty tough. Reinhardt and Levia are, Levia is weird because like Levia can lose to herself, but she can also just beat you up. Reinhardt, Bravo generally wants to block with specific cards in your hand. So, and if Reinhardt intimidates it, usually makes it awkward. And it doesn't really feel like you can really just race Reinhardt either, because if they draw a Blood Rush Bellow, that usually means you're losing the race, unless you're hitting all of your on hits. But even then, Apex Bonebreaker came out, they have more armor, so it's really tough there. So overall, it's like, I do think there are a lot of quote-unquote like slightly unfavored matchups for Bravo, but just the consistency of Bravo and like it just kind of makes up for it in a way. But yeah, I would still say he's one of the best decks. Dash, I would say, is also another one of the best decks. It's a little harder now because if Brute becomes more popular, Arg Smash becomes more popular, and Dash has another like sort of natural counter in that way. But the sort of like Evo, Point Goblin, attrition style Dash decks that look to just play like 2-card hands every turn is really good. And against matchups where Dash needs to be the aggressor, you can just boost. So Dash in general is just extremely modular, and you can build her a ton of different ways. And, everyone just kind of has to hedge for that in a way. Dash IO is really hard to rate because I think everyone knows how strong Dash IO can be, but it does also feel like she's sort of fallen off quite a bit due to her sort of variance and more people, understanding the matchup better. Like if you block out for the most part, and you know, force her to set up, but then you also throw a disruptive attacks when she's trying to set up, then it just becomes really awkward for Dash IO. So I would probably put her in the B tier. She's like on the edge of B and A for me, but it's like the same as Betsy, and like I think if you want to play Dash, like OG Dash is just better, but they're also like very different decks, so I can understand why you would want to play Dash IO, whereas like Betsy and Bravo are like kind of similar, so it's like what's the point there? But yeah, I honestly I want to put Dash IO in A tier because the deck is really cool, it's fun to play, there's so many lines, like the skill ceiling in the deck is absolutely crazy. So if I want to assume that someone could play the deck perfectly, then sure, I would put it in A tier, but you know, realistically, I would say on average I would put her in B tier. Dory, I'm probably going to put in A tier. She's just gotten so many tools. Not so many tools, but heavy hitters definitely gave her some great cards like Blade Flurry, Commanding Performance. There's a lot of things you can do. You can go dual wield Dory with like Hot Streak and Centauri Saber. You can go Dawnblade still. You can go Decimator Great Axe. Dory in general is like pretty underexplored in my opinion, and she's just getting more tools. Her hero ability has like the highest and most straightforward upside out of like all the warriors in my opinion, because her hero ability, letting her attack with her sword twice a turn if it hits, means you really can just load your deck with go again and pumps, whereas with Bolton, you know, you need your charge, you need your light cards, you need things like that. With Olympia, you need your wagers, you need your gold payoff cards and things like that. Kasai, you need your go agains, you need your gold payoffs, you need your yellow cards and things like that. And then is that all the warriors? Yeah. So Dory is really just the most like straightforward, simple, and already has a payoff built into her hero ability, which lets her just focus on pumps and go agains and things like that. So I wouldn't say Dory is necessarily the best warrior, but she's definitely up there. So Dromi, I think, is A tier. Dromi's weird because there's just so many polarizing matchups. Like Ninja is hard, and Brute is probably hard also, especially if you're getting intimidated by Rhinar or things like that, or you're getting just bursted down by KO. But you have, you know, pretty solid matchups into like any dual wield warriors. Even like Dory has the option of going Dawnblade into Dromi, which makes things easier because you can just farm dragons and pressure that way. Dromi is just really weird to rate, but I wouldn't rate her lower than A tier just because she has so much potential. Fi is also probably S tier for me just because he's probably the best quote unquote aggro deck. I know aggro is not really a thing anymore. People have more 3 blocks, people have more sinks, people have more armor. Like in general, the game is not like, you know, chain or stubby Fi levels of speed, but Fi is still, in my opinion, just like the fastest deck when he wants to be, because of links, because of especially with Tenacity coming out. Fi won Worlds. Fi has been performing pretty good. He can mid-range better than Bravo if you build your deck that way. Against like a point goblin deck like Dash, you can definitely just, you know, set up more, go over the top, and just if you're not getting hit by disruption, which Dash doesn't have too much of unless they go 3 CNC 3 erase face, then it's like you can definitely just set up bigger turns than they can. And yeah, I think Fi is probably S tier. I wouldn't be too surprised if he moves down, but also with like, for example, with Brutes and Warriors coming into the meta, I imagine that Fi is a good matchup is good into those decks because, you know, they can't outrace you for the most part. They can't really fatigue you if you're on Emberblade also because of the Phoenix Flame value. Maybe Kasai can do it, or maybe they can do it with Valiant Dynamo, but overall still just the deck just has so much damage output. Art of War makes some insane turns, Spreading Flames, things like that. Moving on to Kano. Kano is such a weird hero to rate because it's like if people aren't respecting him, then he goes up to A tier. If people are respecting him, he goes down to B tier ish, arguably even C tier. No, he's not C tier. I don't think he'll ever be C tier. But Kano is really weird. He definitely has a lot of game into the sort of like mid-rangey decks that want to block a bit and attack a bit, like Bravo or Kasai or Rhinar, maybe even things like that. I feel like Rhinar is probably like pretty good into Kano just because Intimidate can really like mess up their turns. But once again, Reiner, you would really need to do that on like a Blood Rush turn. Like if you lead with the Blood Rush and Kano's about to get intimidated, he needs to really decide if he wants to pop off there or potentially die. KO even can probably race him down. Levia the same. The Warriors probably don't have as great of a time, so maybe they lean more into like Oasis and stuff to shore up the Kano matchup. But overall, I think Kano is a good hero, but it's very specialized, and if people are ready for him, then he won't really do too well for the most part. But I wouldn't be surprised if like, a ton of Kanos do well during RTN season. Kano is just that kind of like polarizing hero. Like sometimes he wins on turn 1, or sometimes you just die and go 0-2. Moving on to Kasai, I think Kasai is probably A tier. I think that overall, as a dual-handed warrior, she has the same like value game into a lot of decks like Bravo or Dorinthia or Dash, where Blade Runner is like a 2-card 8, I think. Yeah, 2-card 8 if you include Valiant Dynamo. And then you have good extending cards like Slice and Dice, which is a 0-for-4 extender. You have Nourishing, which lets you draw up to 5 hands. You can play that multiple times with your Banish ability. You pressure on hits with your gold, which aren't like disruptive on hits, but if your opponent lets them hit, then you get some crazy cash-in turns, or your spoils turns into Blood on her hands turns, or Raise an Army for the really long grindy matchups. I think she just has a lot going for her. I don't know if she will necessarily perform super well right out the gate, but I think, given enough time, she's definitely not lower than A tier is my impression. Katsu, I would probably also put in A tier. I think that, he can run more 3 blocks than Fi, but Fi's deck is just more streamlined with cards that all kind of do the same thing. Katsu things have to line up a little better. He's a little less resilient to fatigue because his ability discards a card. So I think Katsu's still good, but I just wouldn't rate him better than Fi at the moment. KO, I'm struggling to rate because on one hand, there are some games where you can just, blow your opponent out, and there are other games where, you try to set up and you just get blasted by things. I think probably the Bravo matchup is hard for him. I don't really know if he can outrace Fi. He doesn't really present that much disruption. Like you can play CNC and erase face, for example, or like other 1-for-5s that maybe have disruptive effects. But I think my heart is telling me to put KO in B tier. I think it's hard because he's one of those. He wants to be a deck that's really proactive and just have the game plan of just run a ton of 6s and do your thing. But since the metagame is so wide open, it also feels like you kind of need to tech for certain matchups in certain ways. And because KO's hero ability, wants his deck to be built a certain way, and a lot of your power cards want your deck to be built a certain way, like Cast Bones, for example, it's hard. I don't want to overcrowd the A tier, but it also does kind of just feel like KO. Like maybe he's there, maybe he's not. I'm not sure. KO is probably one of the ones I'm least certain about. But yeah, Levia. I think Levia was already quite good before heavy hitters, and with heavy hitters, there's no way she can be worse, I guess. Or at least there's no way her deck can be worse. Like maybe her matchups got a little worse here or there. Like maybe some warriors have good game into Levia or something. But overall, I think Levia is really good. She has Husk. She has the whole shadow card pool. She has all these, new agility tools that she can fit into her deck. I think her consistency is still a big issue. So for players that, want to play in longer events, it's a little worrying that, sometimes your deck just loses to itself. You draw a hand of like 3 no blocks and you get CNC'd, or you die to Blood Depth out of nowhere. But I think definitely at like the RTN level, Levia will definitely do well. As for the Pro Tour, I don't really expect a lot of people to play Levia, even though she has a lot of new tools that she can work with. I think just the sort of inconsistency of the deck is worrying. Olympia, I would probably put into B tier as well. There's a lot of ways. There's 2 main ways I'm seeing people build Olympia, either with dual swords or with Great Axe. Great Axe is pretty cool because it incentivizes your opponent to not block. And Olympia is all about wagering. So if you wager your axe, then they don't really want to block, but they should block because then you win the wager, and that lets you just chain into multiple things. But overall, I think he's probably the hero people are going to need to work on the most. LSS have also said that he's probably the hero that got the least amount of time in development. So it's possible that we're looking more towards like maybe a future expansion slot card that like really brings him to the next level. I don't think he's a bad deck by any means, but I probably wouldn't expect him to win too many RTNs or anything. Prism, I probably am going to put Prism in B tier. I think the new weapon definitely helps her, but I think she's not quite near the strength of where she was before. I think if anything, whenever I play into Prism and lose, it's because I always make mistakes because Prism just makes me mental boom. Like I just have PTSD from the Monarch days and Bravo versus OG Prism. But even with the new weapon, it leans more towards like a Herald Angel build, and that build has like weaknesses for sure. You can still run like hybrid and play Iris with auras to have certain good matchups like against Warrior or against Bravo. But if Brute becomes more popular, it becomes worrying for Prism because ALS becomes a dead card, and that's one of like your biggest ways to sort of like get or regain tempo in the matchup. If you can like set down a good aura, play Arclight, you get to play Genesis, and you just start taking tempo from there. But that strategy is definitely weak to faster decks like Fi or even Katsu or even Azalea, right? I mean, Azalea can get stuffed by Arclight Sentinel for sure, but it's mainly the ninjas, right? So another hero with polarizing matchups. Overall, I'd probably just rate her in B tier. Rhinar, I honestly want to put in A tier, but I'm very unsure about this one as well. So Rhinar, it feels like he has more tools to combat quote-unquote mid-range decks, ones that want to block a few cards, attack with a few cards, because the Intimidate just really like clunks up how you're able to block. Against faster decks like even Dash I guess against Dash you have Arc Smash, so that's another big thing. Against Bravo, once again, you have that Intimidate that really can potentially clunk up Bravo's blocks. And in general, if you draw into your Blood Rushes in a timely manner, your damage is faster than Bravo, and you just gotta not get hit by sort of the on-hit effects from like crippling or things like that. The ninjas and maybe even Azalea might be your worst matchups, decks that can just really push a lot of damage faster than you can. Kano doesn't seem that great either, for example. But overall, I think, Rhinar probably just got like a little bit more help this set with like some agility stuff, send packing, no fear if you want to play that. That's obviously great into Kano. But, well, it's pretty good into Kano. It's not... Actually, is it even good in Kano? I don't know. But anyways, my heart wants to put Rhinar in A tier, but I wouldn't be mad if you feel like he's like a B tier hero or anything. Riptide, once again, another passion project hero. There's just so many bad matchups for him. I don't think you can beat any Warrior. I don't think you can beat any Guardian. I don't think you can beat Dash. I don't if you build your deck more trap heavy and want to prey on aggro decks, that's fine. But with such an open meta, like a lot of decks can sort of, not play around it, but like be better, I guess. Teklo, I think, is another passion project deck. I've definitely seen people succeed with Teklo. He can have a pretty decent matchup in a Bravo, but I don't think he's just not quite there. I think it's also funny that if you're playing Betsy and you overpower a lot of stuff, Teklo basically just can't block, which I think is hilarious. But Azuri, I'm probably going to put into B tier. I feel like she's fallen a little bit from her time just because when Lexi was in the meta, Azuri had a great matchup in Lexi, and you could always count on Lexi, at least in larger events, being like 30% plus of the meta. At RTNs, it was a little bit harder because RTNs or PQs usually have like more open or a more spread metagame. But overall, I just don't think Azuri has that many great matchups currently. Like she can do fine into Ninja, but I don't think she'll really be beating like Warriors or Guardians or Brutes that much. Maybe I could be wrong, but that's just how it seems. So yeah, I'd probably put her in B tier. Victor. Victor is an interesting one. I think I'm gonna put. Victor's such a weird one. I think I'm gonna put Victor in A tier. I think that a lot of people are sort of trending towards this like mid-rangey style of gameplay, whether it's with Dash, whether it's with Bravo, whether it's with Warriors, whether even if it's ninjas that are playing less aggressive cards and are just playing more like 3 blocks and like consistent damage cards, even against KO, things like that. Just any deck where you're able to get value off your block cards, you're just playing the value game sort of better than any other deck. Decks can definitely set up ways to go over the top. Like I think Bravo is favored into Victor. I think any deck that can set up really big turns in general is good into Victor. Like Rhinar is good into Victor once again because the Intimidate makes it so like you can clunk up their block cards, which makes things really awkward. Levia could potentially be good into Victor, but like when Victor is like very consistent block draw off a gold, and Levia is things need to go right, and there's a lot of variance into it. Does Levia win on average? I'm not sure. As for the Warriors, it's a little tough to say. Like both, I honestly have no idea how that matchup will go. Like Kasai has Raise an Army, which Victor can't really deal with, but before like Victor can just block out a lot and stop Kasai from getting gold with block cards that don't buff up Centauri Saber, for example. But in general, I do think that Victor is another hero that leans more towards the Oldhim side of gameplay without going like full Oldhim and just like getting efficient blocks and like hammering or throwing disable or spinal or things like that. And so he's gonna have a lot of polarizing matchups because of that. Like against maybe Katsu, for example, Victor is like extremely favored. Or against the Warriors, you're going to win your clash basically every time, and you're getting a ton of value off those cards. And so Victor really needs decks that like either have some permanence or go over the top really well. Decks like Dash is probably going to be an issue for Victor. Prism is going to be a huge issue for Victor if they're on auras. Rhinar can be an issue for Victor. Kano probably is like 95% into Victor because... maybe that's not true if Victor decides to run 3 AB and has a lot of go again, but that requires a lot of sideboard slots, and I don't know if Victor really has that kind of space. But yeah, Victor just has so many really good matchups. He has so many terrible matchups, and all the middling matchups, you can just sort of outvalue them because Test of Strength into draw a card is pretty crazy. So I think Victor will be good. Do I think he will be highly represented? I'm not sure. I think as more people adjust to playing against Victor, similar to how decks adjusted to playing against Oldhim back then when he came out, like Briar, they had like the Sting of Sorcery, was that what it was? Ball Lightning combo, things like that. Just more ways of setting up to go over. There's no more Mount Heroic in the game, so not every deck has that sort of potential, but I think for at the moment Victor's pretty good, but I wouldn't necessarily rate him at the top or anything, and he might move down as more time passes. Viserai, I don't really know where Viserai is at, to be honest. No one really talks about him. Losing Rosetta is big. It basically means that if you want to play the old style with like Shrill and Mob Skies, you have to play Reaping Blade, and that's 1 less damage, and it's not split damage, so that's not very good. So maybe there's some other build of Viserai that people can explore with. I feel like in general, more people are starting to cut Warmonger's Diplomacy, just because, it was mainly like a Lexi targeted card, and with a more open meta where Warmongers doesn't apply, it's not great. And the ninjas probably still run it just because they have the least downside of including it in their deck as a 0-cost 3-block blue. But yeah. And then same goes for Vincent. Hasn't really gotten new tools, has the same issues as before, can be fatigued. Like towards the end game, if you get into like a sort of back and forth situation, you IP yourself basically every turn, which is pretty rough to deal with. Actually, no, there is the new card, the new expansion slot card that can be pretty good for both Vincent and Viserai. So maybe that gives them just like that slight nudge that they needed to be like a little bit more competitive. But I haven't really looked into it, haven't thought about it too much. So unfortunately, I will be putting them in the lowest tier as of right now. So this is my probably final predictive tier list. The heroes aren't ordered. Like If I really wanted to order them, maybe I think Dash is the best deck, and maybe Phi, and then maybe Bravo. As for the A tier, there's just so many heroes that can be good. I think Azalea's good. I think Dory's probably really good. Dromi's good. Kasai is good. Katsu's good. Bolton, Levia, maybe Reiner's at the end. Maybe Victor's at the end with Reiner, Levia, Bolton. Maybe something like this. Kano and Dash.io have a lot of potential. KO as well. Prism as well. Azuri, not too big a fan of, but probably still better than Olympia and Betsy maybe. And then these heroes, just unfortunately, I don't think will do too much. They might get a few wins at RTN. I'm not counting that out. But overall, not expecting too much. So this was the end of the tier list. Let me know what you guys think. I really just did this on the spot. So I'm expecting... I could change my mind by tomorrow, to be honest. And I'm sure everyone who watches this has at least one different opinion from what I just put up. But yeah, that's all from me. Definitely going to be posting more videos. Maybe just some first impressions deck techs of Betsy or Olympia or some of the new heroes, things like that. And as for a question for the end of the video for all you lubers out there. I'm trying to think. All right. If you could LL one hero right now, no questions asked, doesn't matter how many points they're at, you just knock them right out of the game, who would it be and why? It's such a random question. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.